Welcome back everyone, it's Eric from Rare Candy, and today we have yet again another Lost Thunder deck profile we are going to be taking a look at. And today we are looking at Alolan Ninetales GX, Decidueye GX. And so this is specifically the new Alolan Ninetales coming out of Lost Thunder that we are all really excited for. And actually this is the same list we did feature in our recent testing grounds video, so actually if you guys want to see how this deck looks in action, I'll be sure to have a link down below in the description for you to check that out. So this is actually going to be inspired by the same deck that got top 32 at Japan's recent Champions League tournament last month. Massive 1,200 person tournament, and this deck did end up getting top 32. So I wanted to definitely explore it here on the channel, especially since we are all very excited for this new Ninetales. So let's hop into the deck and see what it looks like. I will point out real quick though, this isn't the exact list that made top 32. It's very close. I think we're like 2 cards off from that one, but very close to it if you are familiar with that deck. But anyways, so up first we have 4 copies of Rowlet, and then we also have 4 copies of Decidueye GX as well. So we're playing Decidueye for this Feather Arrow ability. Once during your turn before you attack, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So after you get a couple of these into play, you can really start, being very efficient with your damage and setting up key knockouts, maybe even picking off some low HP basics like Zoruas or Rockruffs, just as an example. And Decidueye has a couple of other attacks here as well. It has Razor Leaf for a grass and double colorless. It does 90. And then it also, more importantly, has Hollow Hunt GX for a single grass energy. Put 3 cards from your discard pile back into your hand. So this is kind of the main reason we've been playing Decidueye, a card you guys are probably familiar with at this point. Definitely a very good card. Alongside this new Alolan Ninetales, the Alolan Ninetales can set up bench damage on knockouts with its attack. So in conjunction with Decidueye, you can really start spreading a lot of damage and setting up key knockouts. Also, more importantly, Alolan Ninetales can easily help you set up your Decidueyes, which we'll get into in a second. And so for that reason, you guys actually might be thinking, well, wait, where are your copies of Dartrix? And I did not build this incorrectly. We are playing a 404 line of Decidueye GX. That's because Alolan Ninetales can actually just search out rare candies, and it's actually going to be a lot faster just going and evolving through rare candy as opposed to traditional evolution methods. So that's why we're playing the very odd looking 404 count of this list, or of this card in this list. So up next though, we have 3 copies of Alolan Vulpix. This is, of course, a card we need to evolve into Alolan Ninetales, but also Vulpix is just such a great starter Pokemon. If we are able to get this thing out in the early turns of the game, has this great attack beacon for 0 energy. Search your deck for 2 Pokemon, put them into your hands. This is great because we can grab our Ninetales for next turn, or maybe more ideally, we can grab ourselves a Ninetales and a Decidueye, and then when we evolve into Ninetales, we can grab some rare candies and get our stage 2s in play more quickly. So just fantastic setup attack on our Vulpix as well. But of course, Alolan Ninetales is going to be a little bit more important here. So Alolan Ninetales, this is the new one, like I said, we are getting in Lost Thunder. It is not just an alternate type reprint of the old water one, very different than that one. So Ninetales, 200 HP, stage 1, weak to metal since we are fairy type, 2 retreat cost, resistance to dark, which is actually pretty good. So Zoroarks won't be able to hit us quite as hard, but Alolan Ninetales has a couple of really awesome things going on for it. The first of which is this amazing ability. Whenever you evolve a Pokemon into Alolan Ninetales GX, you get to search your deck for 2 items, put them into your hand. So as you can see, you can search out a couple of rare candies to get your Decidueyes into play. You can search out, Choice Band, Field Blower, whatever items you might. And I really love this card too because it enables you to actually play kind of thinner item counts of certain cards, just because you would normally, maybe in the case of like, let's just say a Field Blower or Switch. That actually might be a good example here. Let's say normally you'd want to play maybe around 2 copies of Switch just because if your deck has a lot of awkward retreaters, well, on a deck like this, you can kind of skimp on those counts and play thinner lines of them just because you can have such easy access to them with Ninetales. So that's one thing I really love about this deck. It makes searching out like one-of cards and playing a lot of one-of item cards a lot more easy than you would be able to do in a different type of deck. So absolutely fantastic ability, helps your whole deck get set up. And the main attack we're looking at here for a Fairy and Colorless is 70, and then 30 to 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So kind of like that old Night Spear attack we used to have on Darkrai EX back in the day. A little bit weaker, but that's okay. With the Decidueyes we have and with Choice Bands, we can actually amplify this damage output a little bit. and makes so we are hitting a little bit harder. And then it has a GX attack for the same attack cost. If your opponent's active is an Ultra Beast, you can just knock it out, which is fantastic as well. There's no shortage of Ultra Beasts running around. We have Buzzle GX, the Baby Buzzle, Dustmane Necrozma GX, Dawnwings Necrozma GX. We have Blacephalon GX coming out in this set as well. So all sorts of Ultra Beasts running around. Definitely another great GX attack that we have access to. Next up, we also have a couple of other Pokemon, and this is another card, or another part that the top 32 list played that I was really interested to try out, and that is going to be a 101 line of Swampert. So Swampert is, of course, another Stage 2 Pokemon, and normally running kind of a very thin line of this evolution line might be tricky to get in play, but with Ninetales we can search out the pieces we need pretty easily. So Swampert, it's a Stage 2, like I mentioned. We are using it for this ability Power Draw. You can discard a card from your hand, draw 3 cards. So kind of like that trade ability you're familiar with on Zoroark, but amplified a little bit since this is a Stage 2. Also does have an attack. Hydro Pump for 3 colorless energy is 80 plus 20 for each water energy on Swampert. We actually don't play any water energy in this deck, but we do play 1 copy of the Super Boost Energy Prism Star, so you actually do have access to Hydro Pump potentially, but most of the time we are using Swampert for this Power Draw ability. And another quick note too, we are choosing to play the 60 HP Mudkip instead of the 70 HP one. Very important to note because we can't search out the 70 HP one with Professor Elm's Lecture, which is another new card we're going to be talking about in this list shortly as well. So yeah, just wanted to go over that real quick. Next up, we do have 2 copies of Tapu Lele GX. Of course, for that Wonder Tag ability, we can grab supporters out of the deck, and then we actually do have access to Energy Drive as well. So Tapu Lele, kind of a decent 1 energy attacker, which we don't really have outside of Tapu Lele. Ninetales takes 2 attachments. Decidueye takes 2 attachments. I guess Swampert technically takes 1, but it's a much more situational attacker in terms of how often you can have access to it. So just a nice consistency booster. You guys are probably plenty familiar with Lele. And then to round out the Pokemon line, we have 1 copy of Larvitar. This is another new card from Lost Thunder that actually the top 32 list in Japan played. So for a double colorless energy, if your opponent's active has 3 or more damage counters on it, it does 10 plus 70 more. So this is actually a great way of just taking 1-hit knockouts on things like Zoroark GX or even the new Zeraora GX, just as an example as well. So just a nice little DCE based attacker that we can actually search out with Professor Elm's Lecture as well. To maybe hit these fighting weak Pokemon for weakness and taking easy knockouts that way. So that's going to be the Pokemon line, guys. Going on to our supporter cards, we have 4 copies of Cynthia. That's going to be kind of our best draw supporter we have in the current format. Just a nice shuffle in and draw 6. Definitely good in evolution-based decks and things like that, where sometimes your hand size might be a little bit difficult to play down to get a great effect off Lily every turn. So Cynthia, like I said, just kind of our best, most all-around solid draw supporter we have. But despite that, we are still playing some copies of Lily. Playing 3 copies of Lily, of course. Draw 6 cards, or I'm sorry, draw until you have 6 cards in your hand, but if it's your first turn, draw until you have 8. So sometimes Lily is still a solid draw option, even outside of on the first turn. If you have like a rare candy in hand, just as an example, but you don't have the Decidueye, sometimes you can play down your hand, keeping that rare candy still there, and then refill your hand, trying to hit a way to get your Decidueye. So that's a situation where something like Cynthia wouldn't be quite as good. So Lily, just another all-around solid supporter that we have in the current format. Next up, we have 2 copies of Professor Elm's Lecture. This is a new card I've mentioned a few times. Definitely, I think, one of the best cards that we are getting out of Lost Thunder. Definitely kind of like a pseudo Bridget replacement in this deck. Just because Bridget in the past, we could search out our basics, which was great for decks like Decidueye, and we haven't really had anything like that since the rotation. So Professor Elm's Lecture is definitely going to come in handy here. Search your deck for 3 Pokemon with 60 HP or less, put them into your hand. Pretty self-explanatory. We can grab ourselves a couple of Rowlets and a Vulpix, or even our Mudkip or whatever it might be to start getting set up. Next up, we have 2 copies of Guzma, of course, to choose what we want to take knockouts on. This might actually look like kind of a slimmer count than a lot of decks out there, and that's because we're spreading damage with our Decidueyes and Ninetales, so we actually don't need to Guzma quite as frequently in order to take key knockouts. Sometimes we can just do it with our snipe damage, so we don't need to play quite as many Guzmas as other decks out there. And then just 1 copy of Acerola here to round out our supporter cards. We get to put one of our damaged Pokemon all cards attached to them back into our hand. So this is a nice way to deny knockouts. And also too, we have Ninetales, which has a fantastic coming into play ability. If we can Acerola that up or even Tapu Lele, both these Pokemon have fantastic abilities that we can reuse by picking them up with Acerola here. Going on to our item cards, we have 4 copies of Ultra Ball. Of course, to search Pokemon out of our deck, going to be very important there. We have 4 copies of Rare Candy, so we have no shortage of Stage 2s in this deck. And one thing I do want to point out, this is actually a concern I initially had with this deck before I got some games in with it. We have 5 Stage 2s in this deck, but no Rare Candies, or I'm sorry, no Stage 1s to go with them. We only have our Rare Candies, and I initially thought it would be kind of awkward having more Stage 2s than Rare Candies in deck, but we do have to remember we do have Alolan GX. We can potentially reuse these throughout the course of a game, and a lot of times you actually won't even set up all 5 Stage 2s throughout the course of a game. So the 4 Rare Candies has been seemingly been able to get the job done so far. So next up in the list we have 2 copies of Timer Ball. We get to flip 2 coins for each head, search our deck for an evolution card, put it into our hand. So the sooner we get out Ninetales, the sooner we get the rest of our deck set up as well. So turn 2 we can grab ourselves a Ninetales, and from there we can grab maybe a Rare Candy to grab, being able to evolve into our Decidueyes or whatever it might be. We just have so many evolutions in this deck in general. Sometimes we're going to have Rare Candies in hand, but we're going to be missing the Stage 2, and Timer Ball is another way we can kind of help fulfill that and get our evolutions out more quickly. Next up, we have 1 copy of Netball. This is another new card we're getting in Lost Thunder. Search your deck for a basic grass Pokemon or basic grass energy and put it into your hand. So not only is this a solid option in like the first turn or so when you're trying to get Rowlets down, but also in maybe like the mid to late game if you want to use Hollow Hunt GX. This is actually an easy target to search out our grass energy with whenever we evolve into our Alolan Ninetales. We only play literally a single copy of grass energy in the deck, so normally it would be a little bit tricky to draw into, so Alolan Ninetales GX can help with that by grabbing Netball to guarantee the single grass energy, assuming it's not prioritized or we haven't used it already. And next up, just 1 copy of Nest Ball as well. Just another one-of item we can easily search out with our Ninetales here. So that is the main reason we're playing it. Also, if we are fortunate enough to draw into it in the early portions of the game, it can help guarantee us another basic, because we search a deck for a basic, just put it on our bench. Next up, we have 2 copies of Choice Band, of course, to increase our damage output to GXs and EXs by 30. We also have 1 copy of Counter Gain. This is another new card from Lost Thunder. It's a tool card, much like Choice Band, but if you are behind on prizes, the Pokemon it's attached to pays 1 less energy, or I'm sorry, 1 less colorless energy to use its attacks. That means we can attack with Ninetales for a single fairy energy if we are behind on prizes. Similarly, we can attack with Larvitar for a single energy, Tapu Lele, etc., etc. And we are kind of a bit of a slower deck. We're trying to get out all these Stage 2s. We don't really take big one-hit knockouts, so it's kind of easy for us to fall behind a little bit, maybe in the first half of the game. So Counter Gain just helps enable some big comeback plays, especially since we are playing the Alolan Ninetales. We can easily search this thing out whenever we need it to. And then next up, we're playing 1 copy of Field Board to discard our opponent's opposing tool cards in stadiums, so getting rid of their own Choice Bands or even their own Counter Gains or Shrine of Punishments or things like that are going to be good as well. Next up, we have 2 copies of Enhanced Tamer, so we get to discard a special energy from our opponent's Pokemon. Very nice, we can search it out, of course, with Ninetales to discard those double colorless energies if we're going against like a Zoroark deck, just as an example, Beast Energy, Prism Star, etc., etc. We have 1 copy of Switch. Of course, to switch are active with one of our bench Pokemon. Everything in this deck kind of has an annoying retreat cost, so a lot of times you don't really want to burn your energy. So again, it being a 1-of, we can easily search this out with our Alolan Ninetales to make use of it whenever we need to. Speaking of 1-ofs, we have another 1-of that we can easily search out with Ninetales. That's going to be Counter Catcher. Again, this is another card that's usually a little bit situational, but because we have access to it seemingly at almost any point, it's actually a pretty solid inclusion here, especially too because we are a bit of a slower deck. So Counter Catcher, if you're behind on prizes, you get to switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. So like I said, very nice since we are a bit of a slower deck and can basically search it out whenever we want with Ninetales. And then a couple of other 1-ofs just to round out the list. We have 1 copy of Rescue Stretcher just as a form of recovery. Get 3 Pokemon back into our deck or 1 in hand. And then we have 1 copy of Energy Lotto as well. So the Japanese list actually played a copy of Energy Spinner, I believe it's called, and we actually don't have that card. It's a promo in Japan, and I don't believe it is coming in Lost Thunder. So this fills kind of a similar role, and actually is nice because we can search out special energies, which we play a decent amount of in this deck as well. So Air Gelato I thought would be a solid replacement in the meantime. So look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and then from there you put an energy finder into your hand. So this is nice because if we need an energy for turn, guess what? We can evolve into Alolan Ninetales, search out Energy Lotto, and then find an energy out of our deck here. So just another solid one of that Ninetales is going to be able to find. And that is going to be the trainer cards, guys. Like I said, a lot of one-ofs here, but usually it's kind of awkward to find these things, but because of Ninetales, we just have so much flexibility in terms of how we want to kind of build our item counts here. But going on to our energy cards, we have 3 copies of Fairy Energy, we have 3 copies of Double Colorless Energy, 1 copy of Grass Energy, and 1 copy of Super Boost Energy Prism Star. So I think a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. Of course, we need our Fairy Energies to attack with Ninetales, Double Colorless Energies for Tapu Lele, for Larvitar, for Decidueye, can also sometimes function as the colorless energy that we need on Ninetales to use its attack. And also, a lot of our Pokemon have awkward retreat costs, so sometimes Double Colorless Energy is a nice way to retreat our Pokemon, get them out of the active spot. Of course, the 1 Grass Energy is going to enable us to attack with Decidueye. Also, the Super Boost Energy kind of fills a similar role. We can attack with Decidueye, or if we get Swampert up and running, we can actually make use of this. So Super Boost Energy by default provides colorless energy, but if it's attached to a stage 2, it provides a rainbow energy, and if you have 3 or more stage 2s in play, it provides 4 of any type of energy at the same time. So you can throw this down on a Swampert, immediately start hitting for 160 for a single attachment is pretty nice. Also similarly, you can throw this down, just use Razor Leaf if you have 3 or more stage 2s, or even if you don't, you can still attach this effectively as a basic grass energy to make use of Hollow Hunt as well. So yeah, guys, that is going to be our take on Alolan Ninetales GX, Decidueye GX. Like I said, this is very, very close to the list that made top 32. Just a couple of slight tweaks here and there. And I actually think there's a number of different cards you could even include in this list. Like I said, the fact that we're playing Alolan Ninetales opens up so many different potential opportunities in terms of what types of items we want to run. I think even just as an example, Max Potion could be good here. Escape Rope could be good here. Maybe even Weakness Policy or Multi-Switch. There's just so many different options that we have in terms of one of items that we might want to include because of the flexibility that Alolan Ninetales gives us. So I do think there is actually even more room to potentially tweak this and make some other key inclusions here. But definitely a very, very fun deck. Like I said, definitely check out the match that we featured this deck in. A lot of fun to watch this deck in action. But definitely stay tuned, guys. We have a ton of Lost Thunder coverage coming up over the next several weeks, so definitely stay tuned for that. But as usual, feel free to like and subscribe, and if you can, consider supporting this channel by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or by picking up some merch from our online store, like the Decidueye playmat that you saw in this video. Any of that would be greatly appreciated. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.